Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Friday, March 6, 2026. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host from beautiful British Columbia, Vancouver to be precise, is Drea Humphrey. How you doing there, Drea?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to heading out and covering the Jamil Javani's event later on today. So that should be interesting. He's going touring the campuses to restore the North.
Yes, and he's doing a great job. I covered his speech in Guelph, and I think he's doing a terrific job with the Restore the North campaign. And speaking of the North, I got to tell you, I'm not so much jealous of you. You've been gloating all season long about how balmy it's been in BC, but tomorrow, 16 degrees, and I mean plus 16 in the Greater Toronto area. Break out the tanning butter.
Wow, that's awesome. And it's raining here, so you can gloat now.
Yeah.
But it's excited to be on the show as usual. And it's Friday, which means we have a panel guest today. So I'll let you do the introduction to that. But before we get to that, I just want to remind everybody or let anybody know who's new to our live streams. That you can actually join the show and be a part of it. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to support our journalism, you can leave a comment with a donation of $5 or more. And you can do that through what's called a super chat. And we read it. It's really fun. It becomes part of the show. And if you're just wanting to help us keep the lights on and you're watching this after the show is live, you can actually leave something called a super thanks. And thank you very much for doing that. And if you are watching on Rumble, the non-censorship platform when it came to much of the truths that we've been covering over the last handful of years, you can leave us a Rumble rant and we will incorporate that into the show too.
Yes, again, folks, as Dre alluded to, we do indeed have a guest I'm happy to have from Parts Unknown, Daniel Bordman. He is the senior correspondent for the National Telegraph. How are you doing today, Daniel?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Really
You
appreciate
got it. And forgive me if I call you Chris. I went to high school with a guy called Chris Boardman. Really nice guy. Don't know what happened to him. Hope he's doing well. But forgive me as I enter my Biden years. I have some, brain hiccups. So, guys, everyone, of course, and rightly so, is talking about Iran. And we have a video here of Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand saying Canada has, quote, no intention, end quote, to join the U.S.-Israel war against the Iranian regime. You know what? Even before seeing the clip, you might want to run that by the boss man, Mark Carney, whose opinion on this file changes on a daily basis. I'm not making that up, folks. 5 different opinions in 5 days. Unbelievable. But without further ado, let's see what the minister has to say.
I have indicated in my social media the significant conversations that I have had across the Middle East and Gulf region, as well as with my G7 counterparts over the past number of days. We stay in very close touch by text, by phone call, and we will continue to do so given that we have very close partnerships throughout the region. I want to be clear that we have no intention to participate in Operation Epic Fury. We were not consulted on this military operation and have not participated. I understand that General Carignan is in touch with a number of allies at the Chief of Defense staff level, and will continue to be coordinated in order to ensure that de-escalation and the protection of civilian life and civilian infrastructure is top of mind.
Daniel, I think the biggest takeaway to that was we were not consulted on this military operation. Golly, why would that be? Would it be because Carney keeps doing everything he can, seemingly intentionally, to poke the bear that is Donald Trump, whether it's recognizing the state of Palestine or suddenly cozying up to China as our new big, wonderful trade partner, which just 8 or 9 months ago was our biggest existential threat on the campaign? Could that be why Canada is now delegated to the kids' table at the family dinner?
That's half of it, in my opinion. The other half is, listen, I don't think anyone else is invited to Operation Epic Fury outside of the United States and Israel. Like, I don't think you're invited. And if you listen to what the Americans have been saying, and Hegseth and Rubio and Trump, the Israelis can actually match the Americans at top speed. Canadian military, we've known this can't. Do we have F-35s? Right? Can we actually match the pace of the operation militarily with the Americans? So, like, you might think, yes, it's great for the global coalition to go together and, we all fight together. That's great. But one of the problems with Iraq and Afghanistan you saw was like the bureaucracy, right? And all these, agreeing on rules of engagement and all that. The Americans and the Israelis, I don't think, even if Canada was full on ready and willing to help in Operation Epic Fury, if Anita Anand came on and said, we want in, like, we're the RGC is a terrorist organization, I still don't think we get in, because I just don't think we can match the pace. We would slow down the Americans and the Israelis, and we would even harm the war effort by, it's like, listen, this is like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen are playing on the Bulls, and like, I want to play on the Bulls too, but you play pickup basketball. Like, you can't, like, you would be a liability out there with NBA players. You can't play. So this is another reason you have, we're just I don't think other countries will be allowed in. One, because I don't think they're militarily capable. And two, what you said before, which is the other problem is if you bring in Canada, you bring in France, you bring in the UK, how many hours, and at best, maybe days, weeks, before Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, or one of them gets cold feet and says, we need to de-escalate and say all this nonsense. So if this is who we're going to be, these wiffly waffly proto-Europeans, then we get to sit on the sideline. And if we want to feel like we're big boys, if we have any interceptor missile technology, which maybe we do, maybe we don't. Like, what do we have? Like, can we station some batteries off the case of the Gulf states? Sure. That's a fine, like, geopolitical thing to do. Like, harming, defensively knocking down missiles out of the sky. We can help, sure. And I support that. But let's not forget that our missile defense technology fully is reliant on the American military industrial complex, and then supplemented by Israeli innovation. So this game we're going to play where we're going to slam the two countries that are like supplementing again our defense while not having our own. Well, like, this is why you sit at the kids' table during a war, because you don't have the capability to affect it. And this is, and to me, it's kind of sad as a Canadian, because the birth of Canada as a sort of a nation. You look into World War I, is us and the Anzacs and the Australians and the colonies were so powerful as militaries, were so competent and together that you couldn't treat us as non-country, that we just default became countries, because we had the say, we had the Navy, we had the the Air Force, we had the manpower, we had the moral courage to like put our money where our mouth is in the first two world wars. And that's how you gain power and influence over the world. Soft power is the most part a lie. It does exist, there are propaganda things, but soft power derives directly from hard power. There is no middle power moral international law outside of its own self-contained bubble. So if you want to play, middle power politics, that's great. You can talk to the Netherlands, you can talk to Germany, you can talk to anyone who believes in like international law and rules and order. So you can preach the converted. But this instantly breaks down when you deal with a society that is the better part, like, third world, or just different, right? So like, this type of thinking, it doesn't work outside of like, say Western Europe, right? Even Eastern Europeans who have to deal with Russians, like the Ukrainians aren't going to listen to Canada. Like, they'll take our money, but they're not going to listen to any like advice geopolitically that we have, because we can't leverage them really. We're giving them not great stuff. So this is sort of the fantasy land that Mark Carney has rebuilt for the liberal base. Is we're going back into fantasy land, and instead of Justin Trudeau telling us we're morally more superior, and that's what fantasy land is based on now, it's an intellectual superiority, sort of an international law, and be able to get technocratic bibbity babble is sort of what the fantasy land is based on now. And the Americans have no patience for it, because they have to clear the Strait of Hormuz to make sure that, the communists can't blockade the world when they invade Taiwan. So they're off doing real things, and we're here talking about the military equivalent to pronouns. And maybe we'll rent an American defense system and put it in the UAE.
Well, Daniel, you make many fascinating points, but you should know this about why you're not cracking the roster of the Chicago Bulls, either in the 90s or now, and that's because white men can't jump, okay? But, Drea, seriously, to Daniel's point...
Steve Kerr's on the team.
To Daniel's point, Yes, we don't have F-35s. We don't even have Plan B, SOBs. I don't even know if the snowbirds are strictly for air shows or if those things can actually drop a bomb or shoot a machine gun. But here is what I would counter Daniel's argument with is this. Even if it's just symbolic, even if we just send a couple of warships or a submarine or two to join the cause, I think that is at least a PR win for two reasons. One, we will be on the right side of history in taking down this evil Islamo-fascist regime. And B, we will curry favor with the president when we have all these trade talks on the line. He's going to look around and say, who is with us? Who is sitting this out? We saw with Spain, originally they said, no, you're not even using our airfields. Okay, fine. We're not trading with you. Oh, suddenly, yeah, you can use our airfields. Drea, what say you? If you had Mark Carney's ear, would you say, hey, listen, get involved in this, even on a very limited basis, just for the symbolism?
Well, I think you might have hit it on the nail as to why Carney is going back and forth, because for that very reason, what is the best way to, I think they're trying to toe the line here. I mean, even with what the minister said there, she's like, we do not intend. Intend is a very intentional word being placed there. And we know that Carney has basically said it's not off the table that they are going to some way be that we are going to be some way involved. So when I heard that, what stood out to me is that she's not actually saying we won't. And of course, the whole like we weren't consulted. Yeah, of course you weren't consulted because of all the reasons that you guys pointed out. It's kind of like in high school not getting invited to a party and you're like, I didn't want to go anyways, kind of thing like that. But I don't think they want to give a firm answer because their own base, of course, will be upset if they answer one way. But they know that Trump isn't playing around. He's showing that to the entire world that the Trump administration is a power administration. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do end up getting involved.
Yeah, and Drea, to your point, it doesn't look like all the players are simpatico, while Minister Anand says no intention of getting involved. Well, we have a video now of Canada's top general saying, hey, guess what? Canada might get involved in the Middle East fray to defend our Gulf allies. Let's see what she had to say.
We are not talking about participating to Epic Fury per se. This is not a mission that we are considering. However, our Gulf partners may require defense and support. So within that context, these would be the type of military options that we could consider.
You know, Daniel, this general, I think, is being too cute by half. We're not going to be part of that, U.S. Epic Fury mission along with the Israelis, but we're going to do what we can for our Gulf allies. The Gulf allies are now in the fray of Epic Fury. Iran has this, I think, preposterous strategy of lobbing missiles over to everybody in the region to get them to turn on the Americans and Israelis, say, look, we don't want this conflict. We can't handle this conflict. I don't think it's working. So, I mean, can we at least call joining the operation for what it really is, Daniel?
Yeah, listen, I agree with everything you both said in the last couple of segments. Like, morally, we should be on the right, and you're right. It's excellent politics from Canada. If we were to, stick with the original Mark Carney plan, which was support from the sidelines, and then you're right, send some ships into the Mediterranean. Say you're in a support role. Canada supports humanitarians, Iranian. Like, think of get the Iranian vote. If you're Mark Carney, say we support human rights in Iran and the regime must go, and like Canada's here in a massive support and whatever, civilians, we're peacekeepers, but morally we must da-da-da-da. Trump is happy because then, you're standing by him and it's the greatest thing. He then stops saying, okay, we need a 51st state. You can better negotiate and fix relations. But remember, liberal politics is specifically about causing friction between Trump and Canada because they want to run in an election in where Trump is threatening to annex the country. because that is their best pathway towards keeping power. And it's pretty clear that that's their priority. And under Trudeau and Carney, power has been centralized into the Liberal Party. Many of, I mean, listen, I don't want to come off, undermining our armed forces or security apparatuses, but there is a sense that everyone appointed under the Trudeau era in the last 10 years has an air of suspicion over, and there have been multiple controversies within our military and security intelligence because of the hire. So you don't look at these people as truly neutral arbiters of the military. There's always a potential tinge of Liberal Party over Canada, and you can see, I think we can interpret a bit of that in the general statements that she is, sort of on board on the team, and the team is sort of the red team, but that's not, not it's half of Canada that believes it. And this is the type of stuff that will get us in trouble long term. Is you can't have this type of decision making from your national security apparatus. Your national security apparatus has to be national security first, and you have to be thinking about these things. And if we're going to continue to play cynical politics with the Americans, like, America isn't Russia and we're not Ukraine. Yeah. You really want to test? You really want to test this? Do you not see what they're doing to Iranian military? Like, what do we have? What do you think? Like, again, the Russians are just using wave tactics, and the Ukrainians have created drones. But now the Americans know drone warfare. Do we know? In all this aid to Ukraine, did we ever try and manufacture any, drones or low-cost equipment or these drone interceptors or anything for the new modern battlefield technology? Did we ever try and supplement Ukraine or get involved in a real way that would make us more proficient war fighters? Especially if we're looking at America and, like, you're saying, okay, if we're afraid of an American invasion, what's the most analogous thing for an American invasion? Would be Russia invading Ukraine, the stronger thing. How are the Ukrainians prevailing in defense? Oh, they're doing this. No military readiness has been taken whatsoever on the Canadian military in the last 10 years, right? Yeah. We're not in a better warfighting capability than we were 10 years ago. And that's insane in a world where warfare has evolved so rapidly year to year. We're not just 10 years behind. We're ages behind. And that's what people should be worried about here is we're living in absolute fantasy land. But it's good that, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis and the Americans are getting rid of an Islamo-fascist terrorist group before they can get a nuclear weapon and threaten the entire world. So the right thing is being done by the adults in the room, and that's very good. And it would have been nice had Canada just done the Mark Carney thing, said thumbs up, good job, and then sat in the corner, and then we could just been on the right side of history and taken the win. But we decided that we must appeal to insane boomers who live in fantasy land, and we must keep fantasy land and international order and alive at all costs.
It's amazing because, to your point, or to Daniel's point, Drea, these people that are critical of this mission, they're saying, why do we have any skin in the game? In fact, all I see on my daily basis is gas prices going up. Well, this regime was slaughtering tens of thousands of its own people, a lot of them young people, just in the last few weeks alone. They are clear about getting rid of the little Satan and the big Satan and all the other Satans in between. I have no doubt if Iran had nuclear warheads and the missiles to launch them with, they would be lobbing them into Israel and the United States. And one last point, those critics that say, yeah, how did the whole regime change strategy work in Afghanistan and Iraq? It's not the same. And the reason is, if you look at Iran 47 years ago, before the Shah was deposed and they had their revolution, this was a very Western country, very European country. These are predominantly Persians, are not Arabs. The vast majority of people want to take their country back. For all those reasons, I say this is an incredibly important mission, probably the most important mission, military mission of our young century so far.
Well, when you ask the question, why should it matter to us? That's a question that I asked in some of the recent protests. Any protests that involves anything foreign, that's the question I asked. Why should Canadians care? Well, number one, we saw the large amount of Iranian Canadians coming out. But when I asked that question, their answers were a little different than what I normally hear. Understandably, usually people are saying people dying, and of course that's important. But what was different with what they were saying was, well, because it's already happening here. Like, it's already begun here. You should care, because the same reason Iran fell and isn't free is because it's the same thing. The patterns are happening here. You guys should be learning from us. And that's why you should stand for this regime to fall. And, of course, they're always concerned about the ties that the IRGC has right here on our soil. And I think that's something for us to remember, too, about, making that regime fall.
Oh, and Drea, as I've said, if they're willing to slaughter their own people, you don't think they wouldn't think twice of slaughtering us in the West? I mean, that is the kind of 7th century savages that are part of the Iranian regime right now. Yeah, so as the mechanic says down at the shop, when it comes to preventative maintenance as opposed to fixing the car, you can pay me now or you can pay me later, and always, always, always the pay me later plan is much, much higher. But Drea, let me keep you on this because it's right in your backyard. Evidently, David Eby, he's doing the Sergeant Schultz routine. I know nothing. I saw nothing. He evidently has no information that India is involved in extortion in British Columbia. You got to be kidding me. Let's roll this whopper of a clip.
So just to be clear, though, the Bishnoi gang has taken credit for some of what has gone on in your province, both in your province but also in Alberta. You have never been briefed or been made aware of any connection between that and the government of India, to be clear?
Just to be clear, the allegations that we heard that the Bishnoi group was involved in these attacks in British Columbia led us to lobby the federal government to list that organization as a terrorist organization in Canada. And I'm very glad that the public safety minister did do so. There are many published allegations about the Bishnoi group and potential connections with the Indian government. But for what we have information for at the political level, at least in British Columbia, we don't have information about the Indian government's involvement in extortion. And certainly, if government officials do, I hope it's forming part of the basis of the police investigation work that's happening.
Well, that was grease lightning, that group being designated as a terrorist group, because going back to, you mentioned the IRGC in the previous segment, Drea, when they shot down the Ukrainian airliner in January of 2020, there was something like over 50 Canadian citizens and 30 permanent residents of Canada on that plane. And it took the Liberals 5 years after that massacre to designate the IRGC as a terror group. But getting back to Eby, what do you make of this, idea that he has no information?
Well, that's what I've been calling him, is David Know Nothing Eby lately, because this is just the theme we're seeing even when it comes to the concerns with land rights out in British Columbia. It's like, well, if this is true, what good are you? If I'm a journalist and I'm hearing about it, what excuse does the premier have to, at the very least, not looked into it himself and tried to get some answers? And let's not forget, this is the former attorney general. This should be right up his alley. There's a little joke we put up there in case you haven't heard about the recent Aboriginal title claim over Vancouver and a lot of the surrounding areas. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means. But Premier David Eby he claimed he knew nothing about that, yet he sat front row at the signing ceremony for that agreement. So this is just who we have. Premier David Eby is just pleading the fifth on everything that matters right now, it would seem.
Unbelievable. Daniel, if I was the journalist in that interview, and whether it's about the terrorist group, whether it's about the native land claims, what have you, and Eby says, I don't know, I have no information, my follow-up question would be, why are you premier?
Yeah, that's a good question. Listen, I think the answer to this is he was just lying before, and so was the Liberal government about the whole India thing. The Indian government Hardip Singh Nijjar saga was purely to cover up for the Chinese foreign interference scandal. And then Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh went along with that. And I think what we're seeing here is there's been a shift in the Liberal Party, and this is the Carney thing, and he was just in India, let's not forget, and got some deals done. And remember, India was very, very mad at us because they maintained that they did not kill Hardip Singh Nijjar, but also Hardip Singh Nijjar was a terrorist, which had been extradited. And then it got into this whole extradition crisis. So if you talk to the Indians, again, Lawrence Bishnoi is in jail in India. And many of the leaders of the Lawrence Bishnoi gang are active in Canada. And they have active extradition requests on them from the Indian government. Okay? So we accuse the Indian government of running an extortion scam through the criminals. They're asking us to export back to their country so they could put them in jail because they classify them as criminals. And I've been to India. I've talked to the Indian government officials on this, Punjabi officials. They're quite open. Like, you have a Punjabi crime problem. You're importing criminals and the worst people from Punjab. And so this isn't to gaslight people, say like, oh, it's not that there aren't Indian-based gangs extorting people in Canada or gangs from Indian origin descent. That's all I'm saying. It's just these aren't being directed by the Indian government. And in fact, most of the gangs are Khalistanis who are actively anti-Indian government. Like, a lot of the gang warfare is a proxy war between India and Pakistan on our soil because we've let Pakistan fight a proxy war and jihadists fight proxy wars on our soil. So why not, right? And they've done it through the Khalistan movement. So a lot of the Khalistani movement has now been extorting and harassing people and then trying to blame it on the Indian government to cover their own tracks. And the Liberals were fully on board in NDP letting them do this and starting a fight with India for ideological purposes because it benefited sort of everyone there. And now you've seen a change. And listen, Brookfield's invested in India. So that's how we're making decisions. Like, Mark Carney's like, listen, Brookfield wants to make money and India has more money than Khalistanis. And I'd love it if, like, listen, I've been on the record. I'm okay if Mark Carney turns Canada into a Brookfield subsidiary, as long as we get to have a functioning country.
I think we already might be. And you know, Daniel, to your point about the Khalistanis, my Indian sources tell me, and I believe them, that the Khalistani movement is more of a thing in the UK, the US, and Canada than it is in India.
I've heard that too.
It's dead. It's completely dead. I've been to Punjab. It's completely dead there. It's being propped up in the Anglosphere, and it's involved in narco-terrorism. Like, a lot of the truckers you find who get caught. They just had 4 truckers all around 20. Like, these are, and it's particularly through one community. It's a certain set of, most Sikhs are not Khalistan, the vast majority, and the one sect, which would be Jat Punjabi Sikhs, even they are not full-on Khalistanis. In fact, the Sikh woman who was just murdered by Khalistani terrorists was a Jat Sikh Punjabi who was criticizing the Khalistanis.
Yes.
This is a very unpopular movement among the Sikh and Indo-Canadian community, but a very, very powerful movement in Canadian politics. They learned how to game the political system. They learned how to infiltrate at the primary level. They're very good at dumping money and bussing people in to do the primaries. Drea, you're familiar with this. I mean, this was the BC is the hub of this, and even the Conservative Party of BC, right? They just, this is, they call up Khalistanis. Here's 300 random Indian temporary worker students coming voting yes this for whatever policy would come in out, and these people are essentially laundering what is essentially narco-terror money. Canada is a very easy country to launder money into, and our biggest national security threat and personal threat, in my opinion, is the fact that these criminal organizations found that a great way to launder money is through politics, because you get a receipt on political donations.
Yeah.
So you can, if you have enough crazy, you divide that political money, you flood into the political party, and it's a great investment. Because if you're dumping money into the major political parties, what's the political will to stop the Khalistan movement?
Or you can go to a British Columbia casino, Drea, as you know, with a hockey bag full of $100 bills and launder it that way. Guys, we have to take a break. We're at the halfway mark. And on the other side, switching gears, wow, here is why Premier Danielle Smith is my favorite premier by a country mile. She is pushing back against harmful gender ideology. Where are the other premiers on this file? Good for her. We'll pick up that discussion, folks, on the other side.
Alberta is at a crossroads. For years, I've heard the frustration. I've felt it too, but frustration doesn't build a country. Preparation does. In my new book, Independence Blueprint, What Alberta Can Learn from Quebec, I break down the hard mechanics of sovereignty, what we can learn from Quebec's 1995 referendum, the research that's already been done, and what would actually come next for a free Alberta. There's the constitutional process, currency, pensions, continuity of services, trade, resource control, Indigenous partnership, and international recognition. These aren't slogans. This isn't fantasy. These are just hard facts and serious preparation. Whether Alberta stays or goes, we need to understand the stakes. Head over to buy your copy today at independenceblueprint.ca. Let's be prepared, because our time is now.
You've finished a long run. You're hot and thirsty. This is what we call a last resort. If your most recent electricity bill says the rate of last resort, then your rate is like the half-finished water bottle you noticed sitting on a bench. It will serve its purpose, but there are likely better options available.
I just got my copy of Sheila's book. Can't wait to read it. Read an excerpt earlier. It was awesome. I used to live in Alberta for 2 years. If I was still there, I'm voting separation or 51st state, whatever you want to call it. I'm getting out of Dodge. I don't care. So good luck to Sheila on her magnificent...
I'm Albertan, by the way. I don't know if you knew that I was born
no,
there. But...
I did not know that, Drea. So... speaking of Alberta, why don't we throw to Premier Daniel Smith not backing down to some woke reporter?
There were some students outside critical of your policies, some critical of the transgender policies, saying that they're harmful to trans youth. Others talking about the bargaining agreement with teachers in October and how that was handled. I should note there was also a smaller group who was in support and had a honk for Smith's sign. So I just kind of want to get your response to the students outside who are critical of your policies, largely about the handling of the bargaining agreement and the policies around trans youth.
Well, I think as high school students getting ready to be able to vote in a few years, it's encouraging to see that they're paying attention to local issues and current affairs. I think that's a positive sign. So I don't have any objection to anybody raising their voice on things that they care about. When it comes to the teacher contract, we needed to get kids back into school, especially high school kids who are in danger of not being able to write their diploma exams, which is an essential for getting into university. Those are the kids that were very much on my mind as we were out of school for 3.5 weeks and had to defer the final exams. So I would say that 3.5 weeks does demonstrate that we value the teacher's right to strike, but we also support the right of kids to get an education. And so we took the balance that we thought was necessary. And I think on balance, most kids are glad to be back in class and most parents are glad that their kids are learning again. I think most teachers are happy to be back in class as well. As for trans policies, I think you're seeing a fundamental recalibration on this around the world. In the United States, I would note that 2 of their major doctors' associations have aligned themselves with our position that kids should not be receiving surgical treatment until they're adults. And we shouldn't be doing experimental drugs on children. That's becoming a very strong international position. And so I feel like we may have been first on that, but we do also want to support that when a child becomes old enough to make mature adult decisions and understand the consequences, that they're supported in that pathway. But when they're 15 years of age and younger, they're still a minor, and they have to be, there's a limited number of decisions that they're able to make until they're grown up enough to understand the consequences.
Oh my God, listen to that rhetoric. What does Skate Canada have to say? Are they going to maintain their ban on competitions in Alberta? And I got to tell you, the reporter, there's some kids outside, there's girls pretending to be boys and boys pretending to be girls. Did you find anyone, I don't know, pretending to be Napoleon Bonaparte or Jesus Christ? I mean, do we acquiesce to that psychosis as well? Drea, let's go to you first because I know you have a hard out at 1:45 the hour. What did you make of Premier Smith's comments?
Well, first I'm going to start with the reporter's question. I thought it was pretty fair, to be honest, and in the way that he threw in there was, some people out there in support. I didn't think it was too bad. And you know, there's students out there, so I thought it was a fair question. But she always nails this stuff. She's on the right track. It's embarrassing that she's pretty much the main premier. There's not much support in the same direction, but she's right. This is a recalibration we've seen in the UK. Things like puberty blockers being banned, and other places. We saw the WPATH file come out where it exposed that where we're getting this affirmative care guidelines, it's actually from professionals who basically admit, we saw in the videos, they are experimenting on these children. They don't know what they're doing and what the outcome is going to be. They know that they might be sterile. They know that they can't make these decisions. And yet here they are setting the standards for the world. And Canada, aside from Premier Smith, is very draconian when all of the evidence is out there saying that this is harmful for kids. We need to support their confidence in their body and let them know that, hey, most kids who struggle with their gender identity, well, guess what? After they have puberty, they don't struggle anymore. And that's the reality of what we need to be saying to these kids. And she's on the right track. So,
you know, Daniel, to Premier Smith's point and Drea's point, it's almost as though Canada is out of the loop. I mean, I look at the U.S., within days of getting office last year again, President Trump restored Title IX, which protects women's and girls' sports. We saw that infamous medical clinic in the UK shut down, and it is now completely discredited. And yet when I go into a federal airport, a federally regulated airport in Canada to use the men's room, I'm greeted by tampons and sanitary napkins. Why are we still drinking this woke Kool-Aid? Maybe that's a rhetorical question given who's in office. But what are your thoughts on why we're not going with the flow of taking a stand against what I call transanity?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think what this comes down to, whatever it says, is I think a big problem in like the grand scheme of wokeism, the big culture issue of our time is we have started treating adults like children, and we've started treating children like adults. And that has caused major societal insanity. It's completely inverted. And Daniel Smith is getting on in front of Canadian reporters and having the audacity to say that children are children and should be treated like children, and adults are adults and need to be treated like adults. This is where the country needs to go, right? This is reality land, right? Adults are adults, children are children. You know, men cannot become women, but if you want to pretend to be one, you're allowed to do that, but reality exists. Bill C-16, 10 years ago, Jordan Peterson, blah, 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 blah. But it's a fundamental unwillingness to acknowledge reality, I think a lot of Canada suffers from. And we got over Justin Trudeau and we wanted him gone, but we didn't really realize that there isn't really a mea culpa willingness among the Trudeau base. So what Carney has provided, and I would think Carney's so successful as a politician, we have to at least give Carney his flowers because he is doing well, is he has come in and he has extended the adult fantasy of many of the liberal base, where adults can be infantilized as children, right? So we're seeing one thing is that children being treated as adults, which is a transanity, and then the other thing was sort of this Carney, Big Daddy Carney thing is like keeping the adult base in sort of this extended adolescent phase where we can believe in these fantastical ideas, where we don't ever have to take acknowledgement and say, oh my God, our institutions failed us. They castrated the children, all these different types of stuff. We can sort of believe that there's this international order, grand rules, international law, like the systems that are all that we have, and it's great. But again, all of this is broken down because no one believes in Canadian integrity, or half the country doesn't, and sees it as an anarcho-tyranny, where they realize, there's certain things you can get away with. You can threaten a synagogue. You can bring a bullhorn outside a synagogue and threaten it and know things, right? But you can't do that to a mosque. You can burn down a church and, every 10 churches are destroyed, one of it makes the news, right? Yeah. So there's been over 120-ish churches destroyed in the last few years. Hit the news about 12 times, so 1 in 10. Whereas, it's the opposite on a mosque, right? For every, 10 claims of Islamophobia on a mosque, only one of them is actually true, where it's like, okay, there actually was a case of Islamophobia. throw a piece of bacon at an actual Muslim and hit him in the head. Like, okay, fine. But most of it is the hijab hoax and all that. So I think there's a big part of Canadian society that doesn't, and especially the Trump derangement syndrome, doesn't want to come into reality. Wants to extend the sort of the last 10 years, pretend that Trudeau wasn't, crazy or didn't happen, that they were always these smart, technocratic world orders. Look, he's in Australia and the Australian liberals leftists clap. Look, he's in Europe and the Europeans are clapping. Look at that Davos speech. He's maintaining this technocratic bibbidi babble. And a lot of Canadian upper middle class urbanites love this because it is like a bedtime story with them, and it keeps them in this extended fantasy land that I think is causing these major problems in Canada that, extend out there. So in my analysis, that's the, I don't know if that's the Freudian or Jungian analysis of our country, if we're going to put it that way.
And Drea, I know you have to go in the next minute, and I have to ask you if we have super chats. But to Daniel's point, and I think it's a profound one, this whole idea of treating children as adults, but only for sex reassignment, not for alcohol, not for cannabis, not for cigarettes, not for buying fireworks, not for getting pornography, not for voting, all of that. We have age prohibitions, but you want to take hormones and get surgery for a boy to become a girl and vice versa. Hey, that's diversity. We're with you. This is insane, Drea.
It's absolutely insane. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people really coming face to face with their cognitive dissonance because people are bolder now. The average Canadian is tired of all of this. We saw that with the Tumbler Ridge shooting, with that horrific situation. If you read the comments, if that same shooting had happened even a year earlier, there wouldn't be so many people comfortable talking about, hey, it's time to really reassess our approach with these young, vulnerable people who are struggling. And on top of struggling with something as core as who you are, you have society, you have the liberals, you have the left saying, hey, if anybody doesn't affirm you, they hate you. And so people have had enough of that lie. And I think we're on the cusp of seeing a mass change in that area. That's what I believe.
Yeah, Tumbler Ridge was a disgrace, not just for the massacre that occurred, but also to see law enforcement and the political class do ideological gymnastics to avoid misgendering the shooter. And to this day, Drea, as you know, they're not even giving his correct surname, and that's all about burying his presence online because the name they're giving literally doesn't exist. It is an absolute disgrace. Drea, do we have any super chats?
No love in the chats today.
Oh, okay.
There's people watching, but we got no love.
They must know you have
run.
to leave. You see? They're not shunning us. Well, Drea, I will say goodbye to you right now. And maybe I can keep with Daniel for one last segment. And we've got to wrap it up as I have to go to a caper in beautiful Brampton, as I like to call it. So, Drea, thank you so much and have a great weekend.
It was fun. Good to see you guys. Bye.
All right, then. Okay, Daniel, I think we have time for one more thing. And how about this? I think this is an interesting comment by Pierre Poilievre, namely, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. I think he's channeling his inner Ronald Reagan with that quote. Let's check out the video, folks.
His name was Peter Fechter. He was an 18-year-old and he was an apprentice bricklayer. On August 17, 1962, almost exactly 1 year after the Berlin Wall went up, Peter and a friend attempted a daring escape from East Berlin. They waited until the guards weren't looking, sprinted across no man's land and began to scale the wall. His friend made it over, but Peter wasn't so lucky. He was shot in the pelvis and fell back into no man's land. He lay there tangled in barbed wire at the foot of the wall, screaming in pain in front of hundreds of witnesses. West Germans tossed him bandages, but because he was a few meters into East German territory, they couldn't risk pulling him to safety. After an hour, he bled to death. Right here in this area, in this space, along this wall, which separated freedom from tyranny, the death strip. The East German government called this wall the the, quote, anti-fascist protection rampart. That, of course, was typical socialist doublespeak, the totalitarian abuse of language that George Orwell warned about in his great novel, 1984. In fact, the wall wasn't built to keep West Germans out, but to keep East Germans in. The wall was not an expression of strength, it was an admission of weakness. It was the communist regime's admission that it couldn't deliver better conditions than the Free West. If it thought it could, then it would have built a giant gate and opened it up to welcome all the refugees from capitalism. But of course, no such refugees ever existed or ever will exist. More than 1,000 people died trying to escape East Germany for the West, about 140 of them here at the Berlin Wall. Some were shot by guards, others attacked by dogs, others still drowned in the river that ran parallel to parts of the wall. Each person who tried to escape knew what the risks were. But they were prepared to jump into a freezing river, swept with spotlights and machine gun fire, because that was the price necessary in order to potentially achieve their precious freedom.
Wow. And, you know, when I made mention of the comment, freedom is only one generation away from extinction, Daniel, I always recall how Ronald Reagan, correctly, I would say, is that the biggest threat to America wasn't from without, but from within. And certainly when we see the shift of the Democratic Party to be far, far left, when we see what's happening in the streets all over the West of the Islamists and the Marxists teaming up, they seem to have nothing in common, but that's not correct. They both believe in tearing down the West and rebuilding it as a communist or an Islamist utopia, which never, ever turns out. Your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, listen, I think Pierre is right. Like, the Conservative Party of Canada in general has had excellent foreign policy for decades. And again, if we go back to the Harper administration, I mean, Harper wanted to get those F-35s, and it was torpedoed by the Liberals, who, you know, turned it into a big controversy and all that. But again, Stephen Harper to the modern Conservative Party, since the inception of at least this variation of the Conservative Party, the foreign policy and moral clarity on an international scale has been excellent. I don't think anyone's really had any questions, at least on the right. Actually, no, it's unfair. There is a fringe hyper-populist, I call it populism without principle, that will just go along with whatever trends on the internet conservative web for these days. And these are sort of, you know, I think anti-Ukraine conspiracy theorists and all that. But if you look at the party, they very clearly understand that, you know, Russia's the aggressor, Ukraine's the victim, communism is bad, capitalism is good, Islam is bad, civilians are good. So the Conservative Party, had we had a Conservative Party, would Canada be in a stronger geopolitical position with better foreign policy? 100%, it's unarguable.
And on that note, Daniel, and I think Pierre Poilievre ran a fantastic campaign last year. I went to his rallies. They were standing room only. Hundreds were turned away, not because the Conservatives are mean, but because if they let them in and broke the fire code, you know what the mainstream media runs as the lead for that story. And yet here we are, some 8 or 9 months after the elbows up promise of restoring Canada. And it's nothing has happened tangibly. In fact, things have gotten worse. And what I'm getting at is, do you believe these polls indicating that if an election were called today, the Carney Liberals get a majority? What are your thoughts?
Yes. Yes, I do think, listen, I'm not a Carney supporter. And had he fixed the country and made it a Brookfield subsidiary, I would be. But by default, listen, if he does what's good for the country, I would support him, right? If we were getting pipelines to Tidewater, if we realize that, hey, we have more oil and natural gas than everyone else, we're going to become richer than Qatar, and everyone's going to have jobs, and we're just going to have industry and trade. But it's all smoke and mirrors. And, again, this is the brain, the brains behind Justin Trudeau's administration. We're getting, more Trudeau-esque liberal policies. But he's very, very good at masking it to the Canadian public, and they have mass media. And listen, got to hand it to Trudeau and Melanie Joly and Chrystia Freeland and Katrina Gold. They shut down freedom of speech among large parts of the internet. They nuked news on Facebook. They nuked news on Instagram. They've scaremongered Elon Musk well enough. They've got everyone anti-American hysteria that they have enough of the country in an ecosystem. Mark Carney is a new shiny toy. I think he plays very, very well among the Liberal base because he's not stupid like Justin Trudeau. He can deliver a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation. And should this be the grand qualifier for ruler of the world? No, but he does a very good job of making the Liberal base believe like they're reasonable, rational people that are on the right side of history again. And until the Conservatives actually break through Carney's facade, they're not going to beat him. And listen, my criticism of Poilievre, I was very critical of his campaign. And not, again, I like his foreign policy, but domestically, I thought he let the Liberals sort of get the initiative, right? We all knew Justin Trudeau was going away, yet he let the Liberals have a campaign race and retake the initiative on the Trump thing, right? He was just calling everyone carbon tax Christie, carbon tax Carney, carbon tax whatever, right? Took no initiative. And then let Carney come out and reframe the narrative as the change candidate. And then because Carney took the initiative, the media ran with it and ran away. And like, you can complain it's not fair that the mainstream media is liberal, but you should have known that if you're the Conservative Party. You got to prepare to fight asymmetric war. You're never going to get the CBC on your side. So I like Pierre's now trying to reframe. You got to reframe the narrative. And I think actually this incident might actually be the biggest thing that hurts Mark Carney, because you have to remember, people do not vote and do not think with their brains. Okay. Even the best, most of your thinking is not done in the prefrontal cortex. People think with their heart, their gut, or what's between their legs. And then if you can engage one of those things, you can then talk to their brain. But it's usually the brain is a last resort when it comes to matters of thinking and especially voting. You have to inspire and get the people. And Mark Carney's facade as a competent technocrat, actually the waffling on a major issue of Iran here, there, this is actually the first thing that actually pokes a hole in his competence, master, cool, common collective. Mark Carney sees the whole picture 365 degrees, because that's his facade. It's not Justin Trudeau, right? And the Conservative campaign was geared to take out Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau took out himself. Right?
But isn't that the thing, Daniel? I mean, in politics, much like war, timing is everything. And I go back to late 2024. The polls indicated a supermajority for the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives. And in the Department of Plenty of Blame to go around, let's pretend we have an alternate timeline for Canada. Jagmeet Singh, on the last day of Parliament in December of 2024, if he voted to take down the government, then there's a snap election. There's no time to change leaders. Blackface is the head of the Liberal Party. And it's before Trump gets inaugurated in January. And it's before the T word, tariffs, is uttered. And it's a completely different ballgame. I think, Daniel, they'll be teaching this Canadian election campaign in political science classes for decades to come. It was, I think, an incredible fluke. And if fluke is the wrong word, it all had to do with incredibly unfortunate timing. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was this perfect storm.
Yes.
And all this. But listen, I had spoken to people in the Conservative Party. They were not unaware of the fact that the NDP could collapse. All right. This was a conversation coming in, and there wasn't really a plan for that, right? The NDP collapsing, the Trump tariffs, no one could have predicted. Yes, it was the perfect storm. But the problem is, to quote, defensive coaches, either in hockey or when I was defensive back when I played football, never stop moving your feet. You never stop moving your feet. And the Conservatives stopped moving their feet. They were up 20 points and they started playing defense, right? You've all watched the Leafs. You remember the Leafs collapsing to Boston when they were up 4-1 and then they lost their aggressive and then Boston's in the zone. That's what this was like. It was just playing defense, no offense, right? Because, they were telling, the polls have you here. So
I know what you're getting at, but you know what? I think the best example of this, Daniel, sorry to interrupt, it was that 1993 playoff game in Buffalo. It was the Houston Oilers in January, frigid. I think at halftime, I'm going by memory, I believe they were up 38-3, okay? Virtually the whole stadium, in terms of fans, had already left. And they missed the greatest comeback in NFL history. And I'll never forget, 25 years later, Sports Illustrated had a story about that where they interviewed the players involved in that game. And they talked to some of the Houston linemen. And there was one quote that resonates, and I think this makes your point. when the second half began, there was a quick score by Buffalo. Then there was an interception, and suddenly a couple of fast scores. The gap was getting closer, but Houston was still ahead. And what he said, Daniel, at that point, we started playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win. And he said, and when you play not to lose, guess what? You lose.
Yeah, I agree. That was my analysis of the conservative campaign as they saw the lead coming out, is they just couldn't get on the aggressive. Pierre Poilievre needed to throw the pollsters. He needed to support. Listen, if you love the Conservative Party, you should never give money to the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party takes your money and uses it to pay liberal pollsters to tell them to do the wrong thing. It's just the conservative campaign strategy is load gun, point at foot, pull trigger. Okay? If you love the Conservative Party, if you want the Conservatives to take, if you're a Pierre Poilievre supporter, donate to the NDP. Okay? You need to get the NDP functioning again, because they're the only things, right? Give them money to destroy the left, because everyone's incompetent, right?
But Daniel, I think you're trying to revive a dead dog. I'm not exaggerating. I think whenever the next election is, you could see the NDP go down to 1 or 0 seats. I'm not kidding.
Oh yeah, the NDP is pretty much, as decimated as the rest of the axis of resistance. They're falling, which is another hurdle the Conservatives are going to have to deal with. But I truly do believe, this version of Pierre that he had at the beginning, right? I think once he ate the apple and had the T-shirt and had one win, he kind of took his foot off the gas, right? Played not to lose. Pierre needs to get out there. This is who he needs to be, okay? Mark Carney, love him or hate him or whatever, you got to understand he's like a Bond villain, right? This is the final boss of globalism, right? We got BlackRock, we got this, that, we got it all, right? You need to engage your sort of James Bond character side of Pierre Poilievre, so to speak, rather than the bro that was needed to take out Trudeau. Because Trudeau was an imbecile and made us look bad. That's a different thing. You need to say, okay, guys, the adults will be in charge. The adults are coming in charge, and don't worry, we're going to be cool again and not losers. But the problem is when Carney came in, he took the adults are in charge narrative away from the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Right? The adults are in charge. Isn't that all you wanted? Isn't that all Aaron O'Toole wanted? You're going to do the same things as Justin Trudeau. You're just going to do it in a suit and no blackface. No, I'm not going to twerk when Modi comes. I'm not going to put blackface and start twerking on Narendra Modi. I'm going to wear a suit and shake his hand. That's what Aaron O'Toole promised us. Liberal policies, but done in a very, very respectful and technocratic manner. And that's Mark Carney. He's what the Conservative Party promised you for 10 years.
Well, Daniel, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of smart money saying we're headed for a spring election. And time will tell, to use that old cliche. We're almost out of racetrack. Daniel, where can people find your pontification online?
Yeah, listen, I go under my name, so Daniel Bordman. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, like anywhere. You look at National Telegraph, YouTube. But yeah, that's my Twitter account. If you want all the updates on Iran and Khalistan and whatever terrorist organizations are running around Canada, X, Daniel Bordman, at Daniel Bordman OG. But if it's my name and my face, it's usually me.
Fantastic. And what exactly is the National Telegraph?
The National Telegraph is an online news site that we started actually right before COVID. It's hard to release written articles right now, so now it's more online video content.
Yes.
And we can get until the news is legal again in Canada online. But yeah, we have a YouTube page, National Telegraph. Y Claypool and I have sort of been the two faces of it, and we're independent Canadian media who we cover things, and we're very open. We have a center right slant on a lot of things, and all the crazy people in Canada hate us very much, but it's why you do what you do. Gotta derange the lunatics.
Daniel, one last question, and please answer it within 30 seconds because we're out of time. It's the NHL trade deadline, 1 hour to go precisely. Assuming this didn't already happen while we were on the air, if you are the Leafs GM, do you trade Austin Matthews in the next 60 minutes?
No, I listen.
Oh, I do.
You're the thing. At the thing, and listen, I saw the Leafs before Austin Matthews. It was a travesty. He's one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. He's probably top three. Maybe.
Listen, he's got a back issue. I've had back issues too. You can reach for a slice of toast out of the toaster and be in pain. I think this is a diminishing asset. 2 years left on his contract. Try to bamboozle other teams into thinking this is just a slump season. He'll be back on a 70-goal pace again. But that's just me. But the Leafs being the Leafs, they will do the wrong thing. I'll leave you with this. It's looking better for me. I have a bet with a good friend. What's going to happen first? The Leafs win the Stanley Cup or I die. The smart money is on the Grim Reaper, Daniel Bordman, let me tell you. We'll leave it at that. Okay, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, Daniel. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Greatly appreciated. I should be back here on Monday with the sensational Sheila Gunn Reid. As always, have a wonderful weekend. And please, stay safe and stay sane.